Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the 2022 Spokane International Film Festival, the 23rd edition. My name is Pete Porter, and I'm the director of SpIFF this year. I'm thrilled to welcome the co-directors of Vinyl Nation, Kevin Smokler and Christopher Boone. Thank you so much for coming to SpIFF. We really enjoyed Vinyl Nation. So let's start off with the straightforward question, and I'll start with you, Kevin. Why Vinyl Nation and why now? What's the origin of the story? Why did you feel like this was a story that you needed to tell, and why did you tell it in the way that you did? Which actually, if someone watching hasn't seen the film yet, if you could lead us through that a little bit, that would be terrific.
Sure thing. And thanks for having us. This is great. We're sorry we can't be in Spokane, but the truth is we might have just spent all our time at Go Records and Resurrection Records, and we might not have made the festival anyway. So, but we really appreciate you guys asking, and thank you for including us. It's clear you guys run a really cool event. So the short story on Vinyl Nation is Chris and I are old college classmates. I'm 2 years older than Chris, so we didn't have a ton of overlap, and we weren't in the same major or anything like that, so we didn't have classes together, but we had some similar interests. And we went to a school where there just weren't a lot of people interested in making movies. So we were a little merry band of pranksters, those of us who were interested in that sort of thing. And then flash forward many, many years, and I was on book tour, writing books as my day job. And Chris got in touch with me and said, would you like to come to Albuquerque, where I live? It ain't that far from California, where you live. And maybe we can do something. I happened to have written a book about 80s teen movies, and Chris was very wired into the Albuquerque film community. So he said, listen, we got a nice theater in a cool part of town. We'll show the Breakfast Club or Heather's or something like that. And you come and we'll eat tacos and green and red chili, and we'll do a Q&A, and you'll sell some books, and it'll be lots of fun. If you don't like it, you can push on to Santa Fe in the morning. And I said, sure. And we had a great time, and we totally hit it off. And in the course of us sort of reigniting our friendship, I saw some of Chris's films. Chris had made a number of shorts and a great feature film called Sense, and I loved it. And I had been thinking about making a movie for a while, but having trafficked in nonfiction books, I didn't know how to tell a fictional story. I only know how to tell stuff that's real. And so I mentioned that to Chris, and he goes, well, you have any ideas for anything that's real? And it's nonfiction. It's right here in the real world. And I said, well, one, I've always been curious, naggingly curious, like can't shake it kind of curious as to like why vinyl records have come back. And this is the spring of 2018. So the vinyl record comeback is not new. At the time Chris and I started discussing it, it actually begins about 10 years before that. So if we had anything at all, we did not have a, hey, did you hear? Like we hadn't discovered something that people didn't know, like people know. And so Chris was kind of pretty early to point that out and said, well, then what do we have? And I said, well, I'm not sure, but maybe we have what does it mean rather than that it happened. And I said, so is that anything? And he was like, well, I don't know, maybe and I said, well, how do we figure that out? And he said, well, here's what we'll do. We'll get on the phone. We'll pick a day a week. We'll get on the phone. We'll start talking about it. We'll see if this is going forward. And if it's not, then we clearly don't have anything. And if it's going forward, we'll just say, cool, see you next Friday. And we'll just keep moving it. And we literally did that for what, Chris, was it 4 months, 6 months, something like that? It was
probably closer to 6. Yeah.
It was like all of spring and summer. And then somewhere, I think it was around Halloween or maybe even as late as Thanksgiving that year, Chris, who had not only made films, but had, produced for other people and had worn basically every hat on a film set, said, well, if this is going to be real, then here's the things we have to do next, raising money, putting a production schedule together, all that kind of stuff. And I was like, sounds good to me, because I sure as hell didn't know. So it's like, sounds good to me. When do we do that stuff? And he was like, well, if we have this idea that maybe the movie should come out in 2020 because it's going to be a presidential election year, and We have a story that's about a positive subject that people really like, that people can get behind, and it's going to be unifying rather than divisive. Maybe that would be good counter programming to the national climate. We didn't know there was going to be a pandemic, obviously. But and so if we do all that stuff, and we want a movie to come out in 2020, then we should have started with the first step, which is raising some money last Wednesday. And I said, oh, okay. So we got to get moving then. We're already behind. And that was the point. It went from us just talking. Vinyl Nation became real. That was the point that the tablets came down from Sinai, or the double jacket vinyl record came down from Sinai.
There you go.
And it went from being just something we talked about on the phone once a week, because Chris and I don't live in the same place, to actually being something real. And that, I mean, that's the long way to tell the story. And then of course there's a lot. There's the old documentary cliche that the movie you think you're making while you're making it is never actually the movie you ended up making, which we were convinced wasn't going to happen to us, and lo and behold, it did.
So Chris, what was it like working with Kevin, who hadn't really made a film before but had written a book? I mean, there's obviously, like, you have to have the perseverance to finish something like a book or to finish a feature, but how do you take someone's perseverance and turn that into the, like, here are the steps to make a film? Like Kevin said, well, we should have raised the money 4 years ago. So how did you help him out in that?
Sure. Well, I think, first of all, Kevin came at the project obviously with the initial idea, and then just a wealth of questions that just kept us going into conversation and really sparked more and more ideas. And what Kevin was also able to bring to the table early on was like a really big network of people who may be into vinyl records, but if they weren't, they're 1 degree away from people that we wanted to talk to. And so that made it easy in the pre-production, even before pre-production, the research stage, to start actually having phone calls with potential interview subjects, not even knowing if that's what we were going to do, but just to start asking other people who knew more than us, maybe some specific questions, and then also just trying to identify maybe who might be characters in the film moving forward. And then Kevin also knew what he didn't know, essentially. And so the way we like to talk about it is Kevin has the questions and I am supposed to have the answers.
You do. Yeah, you do.
And so that is essentially how the relationship worked for this project. Kevin, again, he would come in with questions like, what should we be doing next? And what do we need to be thinking about? And I would lay out for him essentially the process of how we should go about putting together a film. I'd never made a documentary. All my work has been narrative. So like Kevin said, I've done a lot of shorts. I've worked on other people's projects, and I've done my own feature film that I wrote and produced with somebody else as well. But hadn't done a documentary, and I'd always been curious and thought I probably would make a documentary at some point in time, but I hadn't had an idea. And the idea about looking at the resurgence of vinyl records intrigued me because my wife and I had gotten a turntable around 2014. So, about 7 years into the resurgence, and had started getting into vinyl records. And I realized that I had been kind of disconnected from music for a period of time once it had all mostly gone digital. And I really enjoyed getting back into listening to music in a physical format. So it was something that I was into. And then my daughter was a teenager, or a young teenager at the time, and she too got a turntable, and she was buying records, and she had never owned a CD player. So she was of the generation that only knew music in the digital format, and now was starting to buy music in a physical format, and that format was vinyl records. So I was interested in moving forward, but we had really complementary skills. I'd put together budgets before, so I was happy to do that, and then share those with Kevin, and then he could ask all the questions, literally line item by line item, like, what is this and why do we need this much money for that particular line item? And if I couldn't defend it, then it had to go. Or he may have questions about, I don't have you budgeted enough for this or that, the other thing. Yeah, so again, I think it was a really complimentary process. And then when we actually moved into production, I wore much more the producer hat, and Kevin wore more the director hat. He was in charge of doing all the interviews, and I was behind the scenes, doing the DIT work and making sure we were where we were supposed to be when we were supposed to be there. And our DP was coming from Los Angeles. So we're all coming from 3 different cities and hiring local crew when we got there. So I had to manage that whole process. And what was great about that was Kevin's really good at interviewing people because he's done it for his books. And I've done it some too for film festivals and panels, but it was great to just listen to him do the interviews. And then we would cut and he would be able to come to me and go, okay, what have I forgotten to ask this person? Because when you're in the middle of the interview, you're so like listen into that answer and trying to figure out the next question. And then did I get to everything? And so it's like, oh yeah, we need to ask maybe these 2 follow-up questions. Maybe this person had told us a story ahead of time. We want to make sure we capture on film. So it's a really good way to kind of bounce back and forth. And then when we got to the editing process, it was great to just bring in more people, more creative minds. I've always worked with other editors to help shape the story. And for a documentary, editing is the writing process. So we found some editors who had more experience than I did in terms of editing documentaries. And we just had a blast doing that. And we were in Austin for that part of the process. And so again, a learning curve, yes, for Kevin, but also for me as well. And just having Jason Welling and David Fabella, our 2 main editors who had worked on many documentaries, including music documentaries prior to ours, just really helped the whole process move forward.
So it sounds like it was really productive, and every collaboration has conflict, but I'm sure it sounds like it worked really well.
Oh, don't get me wrong. We totally hated each other the whole time.
You're gonna set a new trend of co-directing from different cities.
Yeah, no, we actually did live in the same place, and we had to move away because we didn't like each other that much.
It's terrible. I mean, you're lucky you brought us back together.
We'll never speak to each other again after this Q&A. No, I think like anyone out there who is thinking about making a movie with someone, with another person, I think we would say like Chris and I are definitely friends and definitely really like each other. I think it helps that we're not best friends and that we each had sort of independent adult lives before we decided to make a movie together. I think if Chris and I had decided to do this at age 22 and 24, I think it would have been a very different experience than doing it effectively in middle age.
Yeah, I don't know if it was just my observation, but it does seem like there has been a change from when I was in film school, which was in the 80s, when it was like there was a single filmmaker. And you're not a real filmmaker if you're working with other people or if you're not telling them what to do or whatever. We have come so far in terms of like, no, collaboration is cool. Like Joel and Ethan Coen are like co-credited as the director. And we've just come, and even in SpIFF this year, we have so many films that have co-directors. And it could just be my narrow experience, but it does seem like there's definitely more acceptance or more embrace of, no, we're collaborators. And this person does this and this person does this, and we work it out. And it's actually productive to have somebody who's like, are we going to work on this today or what?
Yeah, I told Kevin early in the process, I said, any project that I've done or that I've directed or I've written and directed, I've told him, I said, I don't believe in the credit a film by. That makes zero sense to me. Like film is a collaborative medium, and no one person does everything. And it actually drives me up a wall, actually, and I understand where it comes from. Kevin and I both at college studied the auteur theory and everything like that. I get it, but it makes zero sense to me. Why would I not want to share credit with everyone else that I work with, not just Kevin, but our editors and our DP? It's like, because I don't know how to operate the camera. Like I can tell a DP what I'm looking for visually, but I'm really strapped when it comes to like telling you exactly which lens. Like I'll basically like, I need a tight, I need a medium, I need a wide, like, and it's your job to throw the lens on, and then I can look at the monitor and tell you how I'd love to get it adjusted. So I can speak just enough, but not, I mean, that's somebody else's lifetime of experience. And so like, of course, I'm going to give Sherry Koch, our cinematographer, all the credit for how gorgeous our film looks. We had creative conversations about it, but anytime we could set her loose, especially to capture all the additional footage for B-roll, I mean, It was like, this is what we kind of want you to capture, now go. And I was like, and then Sherry went off and just, did magical work. And the same thing again, an editing process with Jason and David, and our music, Catherine Bostic with the original score. Like, I can't write music. And then Morgan Rhodes, who's in our film, actually is our musical supervisor. And boy, did we punch up to get Morgan on board for this project. This is somebody who's part of the Oscar-winning music team of Selma. She's one of the music supervisors for Space Jam: A New Legacy. Like, get out of here. Like, what are you doing on our film? It's collaborative. So I'm happy that you are seeing, more directing teams. And I think even in the narrative world, I think you need to have a good, if it's still just a single director, if it's a separate writer, I think that really needs to be a really strong relationship as well. Just because, again, I don't understand how you can just say like one person created this whole magical world that you're watching.
Yeah. I mean, if anyone, if someone is the kind of person where you're, I'm not talking about you, Pete, I'm talking about anybody. Like, if your ego is so strong that you're the kind of person where it's like you can work a 14-hour day with all of these people swirling around you, and then you can have dinner with them afterwards, and then at the end of the day you sit down in bed and you say, that was all me. Like good for you. Good for you if you have that. We don't. And it was very clear to us that for a movie that was as modestly budgeted as ours, and we got lucky in one sense because we shot a week on, a week off, a week on, a week off. But it was like making a new movie every week, because we had to go home, plan for the next week, and then all of us had to reassemble with a brand new crew because we were in a brand new location. And I remember, talking about how tired I was at some point, and Chris was like, well, like the fun part is like being part of like the Pirates galleon, man, that we're all saying yo ho ho together, and we're all sort of doing this together, and you're going to have those memories with people the rest of your lives, even if you never see them again. And I'm like, well, yeah, that's what gets you up for the 4:45 a.m. call time on Record Store Day in Kansas City, when your plane landed 8.5 hours ago, and you don't recognize where you woke up that morning. Like, yeah, that's what keeps you going.
Yeah. Well, that's terrific. So yeah, the vinyl resurgence, I don't know, when you were mentioning it earlier, I feel like, in a way, if I could use a metaphor, like the vinyl resurgence to me feels like a piece of wood that came over the digital quicksand that you're able to grab onto. Like, there's no effort in the digital quicksand. There's nothing you can do. It's there all the time. And at least I told this to the audience in person the other day, like, at least with the record, you got to get up halfway through and turn it over. So
yeah,
I really appreciate the tactile nature of vinyl. And again, people in your film talk about, well, you can look at the cover. This is when the cover meant something. You don't need a magnifying glass to look at a CD case. Because I remember when CDs came in and everyone was like, oh, these are so awesome. And I'm like, you can't see a thing. So it's just a totally different thing. But I think that could be because I was already immersed in vinyl culture. So I have to do I'm going to geek out for a second. So here's the record
please.
that I played. This is the record that I first played a lot, which is, see, now it's not going to work, but it's the Moody Blues.
Oh, sure.
Yeah. Nights in White Satin like a bazillion times.
Absolutely.
And then, but that was when I was like, I don't know, 5. And so then you have that. And then my stepmom managed a record store. So, the record thing was terrific for me. I still have tons of vinyl. I gave half of it away when I moved, but that's another story. So
bummer. Wish you had it back now, right?
Yeah.
And I haven't, because there are a few that I was like, oh, I gave that one away. Talking Heads. That's why did I do that? And I know it was because the guy that I was moving with was like, I love that record. So I was like, well, you did a lot of moving, so here.
Yeah, on the island of lost vinyl somewhere.
Yeah, probably so. But he took it, and I'm sure he really appreciates it. So I really appreciated the because you mentioned shooting in a different place, but how you managed to have a variety, not only of the different people that you were talking to, but also like the different places that you would have. So like there's not just the cinematography piece setting up constantly, but the way that you had you made it look very different from one person to the next. And I really appreciated that. Like the young women who are talking about having been DJs, the young woman who's talking about, or the people who are talking about working in the factory and where this vinyl resurgence is coming from. It's just such a great looking film and a great sounding film altogether, and how you wove all of these different pieces to it. So to get back to your idea earlier, Kevin, like we're not telling anyone anything new. Like they know there's a vinyl resurgence, but you managed to find like the vinyl resurgence isn't what you think it is. Story.
Yeah. Chris, I'll answer that. I'll talk about how it looks and you talk about how it sounds. Okay. The reason it looks great is our cinematographer Sherry Koch, who's a genius, and we were lucky to have her. And Sherry was actually the first cinematographer we talked to who didn't say, "This is your movie, I'll make it look any way you want it to." We actually said, "No, we don't know how to. We're not shooters. We don't know what lens to use. So we need someone who has their own opinions about our story." And Sherry was that person, and we all worked really well together, and we liked each other a lot too. In terms of how each person looks a little bit different, the idea behind that was to capture somehow the sense that vinyl being a physical object, when you're filming a person sitting and talking, and we had a lot of people sitting and talking. We didn't think it was going to be that interesting to look at if we didn't do something creative with it. And so the idea was to make sure that each person who was sitting and talking looked like they were in physical, tangible space where you could reach out and touch the things that were in the frame. So we didn't film anybody against a blank wall. We didn't film anybody against a green screen. We didn't film anybody too close up. Like everybody is surrounded by the objects in their lives, like records. And then in terms of like what we were trying to say, it was clear that we were making a movie about the present. If we were talking to people who were 20, we were not making a movie about nostalgia. We were not making a movie about people who had owned vinyl once upon a time. Chris and I hadn't owned vinyl once upon a time. We're both in our 40s, but we're a bit too young to have been hardcore vinyl people growing up. So we were making a movie about the present. And therefore, in order to do that, we had to ask questions about the present state of vinyl. Not only like, what is it like to be someone who's 20 interested in a technology from your parents' and grandparents' generation? But we had a wealth of stereotypes from pop culture in the back of our minds about records, from High Fidelity and Ghost World and places like that, where record people were sort of all seen as the obnoxious white men who look like they just rolled out of bed. And so we're like, well, that doesn't interest us very much. And it doesn't even feel true. High Fidelity was almost 20 years old when we started making this movie. So we wanted to make sure we were also capturing the present state of records, because we felt like a comeback probably also meant our idea of what a vinyl person was bigger too. And then as we talked, people brought up things that we hadn't considered. We hadn't considered the environmental impact of vinyl until we pre-interviewed John Vanderslice, and he sat us down and he said, "Let me tell you why the vinyl revival is creating mountains of plastic toxic sludge that we're going to have to deal with in 100 years." And we're like, and I was like, "One moment, please." And I pulled out a very large notebook and I was like, "Please just start talking."
Yeah.
Chris, you want to talk about why do you want to talk about why our movie sounds so great? Sound really immodest.
Well, like I said, we were lucky enough to work with Morgan Rhodes, who's in our film, and she's a music supervisor. And so before we even went down the path of the score, we kind of talked with Morgan and said, as you were saying, Kevin, we're making a movie that's in the present, takes place in the present. We want to make sure we're representing today. But since vinyl has that nostalgia feel to it, we feel like it should still, the sound should hearken a bit to the past, but it shouldn't just be set in the past. And then we also started to play around. Well, you know, honestly, like what's really cool about records is you have them for a really long time, and you know, you pass them along to other people. Like you were just saying, Pete, like you moved and somebody saw your Talking Heads record and you were kind enough to give it to them. And so now that person enjoys that record. But if you had scratched it at any point in time, or if it had been adjusted in any way, your story of that record is now part of that person's story with the record, which is really cool because you're not going to get that in a digital file. Like, sure, I can give my daughter a Spotify playlist for her birthday, but I don't think she's going to thank me very much afterwards. But if I hand her a record, she might be a little bit more excited about it. And so the idea of a record as a metaphor for the past, present, and future was something that we were hoping we could capture sonically as well. So that was the vague concept that we gave to Morgan when we asked her to start pulling tracks. And like Kevin said, we've got a tiny budget. So we're not going to have a soundtrack full of your most recognized artists. It's just not going to happen. We had to fit it within a certain budget, but we did budget for a movie of our size a decent chunk of money for music, because we knew, like, you're making a music documentary, you're going to have to spend some money there. And we saved a little bit of powder so that if there were a track or two that we felt really strongly about, we would hopefully have the money to be able to spend on that. One of the things that was interesting during the making of the film, when we were in Austin, Texas, for one of our trips to Austin, we went to Gold Rush Vinyl, and Karen Kelleher, after her interview and after the tour of her new pressing plant, asked if any of us would like a record. So yeah, duh. The answer is always yes. I would love a record. And her next question was invariably, well, what do you like to listen to? What are you into? And I had learned from people asking me this question that I should not answer it. I said, I'm too stuck in my own lane. And part of the process of making this film is to broaden my horizons as well. So you give me a record you think I should be listening to right now. And she gave me a record, and I must have made a funny face at the cover because she took it right back out of my hands. I don't even remember what that was. And she gave me a different record. And the second record she gave me was Grizz, Ride Waves. I didn't know anything about Grizz. It's an amazing cover art. So I obviously made a much better face when I got that in my hands. And other people in the crew who knew more than I did said, could I get the Grizz album too? I'd like to take that home. So I brought it home, didn't know anything about it, dropped it on my turntable as soon as I got home, and immediately fell in love with it. And I played that thing that the whole week that we were in between shoots. I just played that constantly. I loved it. And to the point where when we were looking for songs to drop into the film, I made a strong argument for sharing a song in the end credits that was something that we had been introduced to over the course of making the film, and that we could maybe introduce our audience to, that they may or may not have heard before. And so it's a little Easter egg, but that the end credit song is The Escape by Grizz. And the only reason it's in there is because Karen Kelleher put that record into my hands, and then I argued that we needed to have a Grizz track, in the film. And it's not really even of a piece of everything else that we play, and yet I still felt like it fit the concept of the past, present, and future. And so that was kind of what we were working with. And Morgan just teed up a bunch of great music. And then obviously that doesn't fill everything. So I had worked with composer Catherine Bostic on my feature film Sense. And she's done a ton of amazing work. She's done scores for August Wilson plays when they've been on Broadway. She worked with Ava DuVernay on her early films. She worked with on Dear White People as well, the feature film, and just on and on and on. Toni Morrison documentary, Pieces I Am. So anyway, on and on and on. And she's just kind enough to work with us again. We had a good time working on my feature film, and I was just thrilled that she'd come back around. And then when we didn't have needle drops, we would just tell Catherine essentially what we were looking for, and she served up a whole variety of music. That's what's so crazy, is the score is, it is just a wide breadth of styles, and Catherine can just do anything. So again, super fortunate. And again, I'm not a music person in the sense of I can't tell you like what the music should be. I can just tell you the emotions I would like to evoke, and then show you the scene. And then Catherine goes, okay. and then brings it to us. So it was a lot of fun working with her again.
Yeah, Dear White People and Selma are also both, I mean, this is what one of the things I love about independent film, like you tie all these things together. Oh, that was another great sounding movie. Oh, that was another great sounding movie where where the sound was like really deep in the characters and understanding of what happened. So I don't know. Those are, that's kismet, right? You just get, who knows how you find them, and you ask them and they're like, yes, I can do that. And you're like, oh, that's
Yes,
amazing.
yes. And then
So-
you're very happy and excited and fortunate. And then you realize if we ever do another project, I'm going to have put more money in the budget for that person.
Yeah.
They were too nice to do it for as cheaply as they did the first time. Yeah. If all the varieties that human creativity can take inspires you, as it does for me, and I would assume for us every day, like you could do worse than making movies, because you are around all of these different kinds of creativity, most of which are things you could never do yourself, and just are thrilled to learn from people who do it well. It's really it's a very special place to be.
And film is a great medium because it requires so many different kinds of people with different backgrounds. So it's not like everybody on a film set went to film school.
Right. I didn't go to film school.
We didn't go to
neither
film
did
school.
Kevin, so yeah, I mean, I think film is a great, if nowadays, whenever I meet young people who are into this, or I'm asked to talk to students at a school, and ask for advice, most kids that I come across are fortunate enough to have an iPhone in their pocket. And I'm like, you are walking around with your own film studio. Like you have a camera that can shoot probably in 4K. If you just do a little bit of research on the internet, you can figure out cheap ways to actually capture good sound. But I always tell them, get good sound, because nobody thinks about that, but everybody notices it in your
bad sound
film.
is going to kill your movie faster than
But
anything.
yeah, exactly. But you can buy a cheap set of wired earbuds, and you can snip them off where the microphone is, and you get them with a clip, and now you got a lab, and you can run it under the shirt, and you plug it into your phone in your pocket, and now you're running sound. So it's like you can come up with interesting creative ways, and it's like, and use what you have, like the houses that you live in, and the schools that you go to, and the places that you may work, or your friends may work, that maybe you can get into in off hours, things like that. It's like, just gotta go and make stuff. And then again, most kids probably have a computer at this point in time, and it probably came preloaded already with some really basic editing software. But you can, my son has DaVinci Resolve, the free version, on his computer, and he's editing stuff in ways, and I was like, what? I didn't even know you could do that. Like he's adding animation, he's got keyframes, and like, I'm not teaching him a thing. Like he's way more advanced than I am at this point in time when it comes to editing. It's really natural to him, and it's something that he really enjoys doing. And so there's no reason to not do it. You just have, you just pretty much, if you have an idea and you have friends who are willing to go on a little bit of a ride with you, then you have your own film school there. So I basically try to tell people, like, just make stuff, and it's going to be crap usually. Yeah. That's okay. As long as you had, some fun making it, I bet you learned a ton, and I bet the next one you're going to do is even better. And the one after that's going to be even better. So just get out there and make stuff. And it's always exciting when kids actually are like, oh yeah, I'm going to do that. And then hopefully you live in a town that might have a few more resources that you can start pulling from. So here in Albuquerque, we've got a great film community. So there's a lot to learn as well.
Yeah. Yeah, the tools of making films are closer than ever.
Yeah,
really.
And the rest is just talking and listening. The rest is just talking to your friends about, like, after you go to the movies, like, why'd you like that? Tell me why. Like, and then just listening carefully and understanding what makes a movie work and what doesn't make a movie work. And what does someone mean when they say, I stopped believing it, like, or I stopped caring, like, or I wasn't like the character's journey didn't mean anything to me. Like, okay, well, why? Like, those are the things you you pick up. Like I think, yes, Final Nation is a nonfiction movie, but I think we were able to make you care about the people in it because Chris and I had both had 40 plus years of of watching movies and having interminable conversations about like, why does this work and why do you care about this person and why not this person and why did, you know, why does this movie work at 87 minutes and not at 91? You know, like those are that's anybody who makes movies loves to watch movies and have those conversations. It's as important as part of the process as knowing how to use DaVinci Resolve.
Yeah, I would say so. I mean, you have the sensibility. I don't care how much software you've mastered. If you don't have the sensibility to bring to it, your movie is going to be terrible.
Right. And
Yeah.
you can almost always find,
Yeah.
always find someone who has the competency in using a tool. And as long as you have the ability to communicate what you're looking for, and you are willing to collaborate, as we keep saying, like it's going to work out well, I would think, or at least you'll get close enough to your vision or understand how you have to compromise somewhat to get to what you're ultimately, you know, hoping to do. But like I said, like I'm not an editor. I have edited stuff and I've shot stuff when I've had to, but there are other people who just do that better than I can. And I just need to make sure that I communicate in the moment, like what I'm looking for in the editing suite, you know. I really enjoy that process, but it's just more of like, oh, could we slide this over here? Or could we cut it out of that a little bit faster? Or I think we have a transition here that we can make that would work really well. Let's try it. And they just work at the keyboard way faster than I do. And then they are really good storytellers in their own right. So they come, you know, with suggestions of, I think it would work better this way. And you look at, oh, you're absolutely right. And the fact that we can, you know, A/B test things now so quickly, as opposed to when Kevin and I were in college and you still had to cut on film on the Moviola, you know, it's like, yeah. I think I'll make the cut here because I don't have money for another answer print. Boom, here we go. Slice it together. Hope that worked.
Yeah. Were there any notable influences that you would say, like, did you have like a set of films that you ever thought of when you were making this film, or was it just kind of its own project, or were there films that you admired that you feel like influenced the way that Final Nation turned out?
We had seen a couple of movies about record stores and the comeback of vinyl, and we had, and I definitely say we cribbed a few things from there, from Colin Hanks's All Things Must Pass documentary about Tower Records. I think we both really appreciated that movie was an incredibly honest tale of the sort of rise and fall of a business entity, and yet was not accusatory. That movie doesn't come out and say, oh, it was all Amazon's fault that Tower Records. So that was really important to us, that our movie be on the side of that it be really on the side of the people in it and the audience, and we kind of saw those as one and the same. And then we also, the shot at the very end of our movie is taken from a British film called Last Record Shop Standing, which sort of closes the movie by reintroducing you to the cast by featuring them all in front of their record stores. And we wanted our movie to end by you effectively saying, these are your 40 new friends that you met in the course of watching this movie. I don't, Chris, correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think we had too many conversations about like, oh, is this an Errol Morris documentary, or is it a Liz Garbus documentary, or anything like that?
Well, since we weren't using an Enteratron, it was not an Errol Morris documentary. Yes, that's for sure. No, we didn't have anything about that specifically, but like you were talking earlier, Kevin, about how we made sure to frame people within their physical environments. And the other thing that we wanted to do when we were doing that was not only put them in their physical environments, but it was important to us that if you were to, freeze on a wide shot of one of our subjects, there was a story in the frame about that person. Like you would know something about that person in virtually all of our wide frames. I can think of one interview that may not be the case, but otherwise I think the frame itself told a story. And I know it wasn't so much that the frame told the story, but making talking heads visually interesting. I was certainly struck by 13th, Ava DuVernay's 13th. They were put in very specific spaces, and there was a lot of thought put into how they were framed, but it wasn't necessarily that those spaces told those those people's stories. But there was something that I found kind of fascinating that she did in the documentary when she talked with Newt Gingrich. She had a standard shot, but she flipped the shot. She reversed the shot when he was speaking about one side of a topic. And then when he eventually later in the film started speaking on the other side of the topic, she just reversed the image. So he's on the other side of the screen, and just little details like that. So Kevin and I did, like I said, talk earlier about like, if we're going to have a bunch of talking heads, like how do we make this really interesting? And then beyond that, it was like, okay, we have to have a lot of visuals to help us tell the story, because we got to be able to cut away from when people are talking, but we need to illustrate what they're talking about in ways. And I appreciate what you had said, Pete, that you mentioned that you thought the film looked really great. And again, I keep giving Sherry credit for that, but I've been happily surprised how many people have told us like how much they enjoy the visuals of the film. Because honestly, going into our first documentary for myself, I really wasn't sure until we got into the editing room, like what it was ultimately going to look like. I'd seen all the dailies, but I didn't exactly know if it was going to come together the way we hoped it would. And yeah, I was pleasantly surprised. And so that's been really nice. And Sherry's even won cinematography awards at film festivals for our documentary. And it wasn't a documentary award, it was like a cinematography award. And so I've been super happy about that for her. And she literally won an Emmy for lighting design on a TV show that she had worked on while we were shooting our film. So it's like, okay, we're lucky to have the people we're working with. And Sherry's just a great person. And she had to hang out with us in all these cities in Airbnbs. So she really had to tolerate us.
She had two brothers, like for the entire duration of this set that she didn't ask for. But
yeah, it is. Again, it's a great looking film and a great sounding film. So, and again, I'm prejudiced, I guess. I'm biased because I love the topic. Like we talk about I talk about records for hours. So, I mean, what's next for you, but also for vinyl? I guess what's next for vinyl, but what's next for you? I think, something that I read recently, like Adele's trying to get her vinyl out, but there's like a backlog of the number of records that can be pressed. I mean, I'm sure that there's stress or however you want to think about it between people who are like, Adele should get out of vinyl. We made vinyl what it is. I mean, Jack White created his own Third Man Records up in Detroit, and they're pressing their own vinyl. So could you speak about maybe the conflicts with vinyl, so maybe the future of that, but also the future of what's next for you as filmmakers?
Yeah, I mean the industry was already strained before the pandemic. I mean, I believe the Masters fire happened in January of 2000. Isn't that right? Isn't that the fire in Southern California? Yeah, January of 2020. There was I'm forgetting the name of the company, but Apollo Masters in Southern California, one of the two companies in the world that produces vinyl lacquers, aka the first step in vinyl production with any degree of regularity or consistency, was crippled by a terrible fire, and it just like not to overlook that tragedy itself, but it just showed how fragile the ecosystem is for making vinyl. It's an industrial process. It requires a number of steps. It's still comparatively a relatively small industry, and yet the demand continues to grow by 10 and 15% every year, and has for over a decade now. That's really a perfect storm of conditions for something. For a weakness in the system to be revealed and to be crippling, and that was all before the pandemic. That combined with all of the normal supply chain issues you have related to the pandemic, and it is very hard to have vinyl pressing release new records if you are not Adele or Beyonce or Kanye West in some sort of orderly, prompt fashion. I think those things will straighten themselves out. Capitalism has a funny way of doing that. But I think I think it is important to remember that the people that affects the most are the musicians and not the consumers. Like every one of us would like the new Adele album if you are an Adele fan. 5 seconds on Discogs will tell you, will avail you of the universe of used records that are available to you. And the great thing about used records is used records don't have to contend with pressing plant delays. They've already been made. So I would suggest that if you want to spend your time complaining about how long it's taking you to get the new Adele record, put a pin in the new Adele record and go to Discogs or go to your favorite local record store, find a nice used record to buy, which already exists. That said,
we need rewritable vinyl. Maybe I don't know if that's ever be possible, but
yeah. And these are a lot of.
If I get my dream would be that people go around my neighborhood and take down every vinyl fence and turn that into records.
Oh yeah,
that'll be the next thing.
Yeah, and so the issues now are not only supply chain issues, but they're how do you contend with the not small environmental footprint of vinyl? People are investigating recycled vinyl. Right now, recycled vinyl doesn't sound very good, but we'll get there. We'll get to the point where you can go 100% recycled record and it sounds great. A lot of the research is being done there. And of course, the NFT fad has touched vinyl as well, because vinyl is a physical collectible object. And so we're talking about people are talking about things like encoding NFTs in the surface of vinyl. Listen, stranger things have been done. We talk about some of them in our movie where people Third Man designs a record that plays from the inside out, and the Flaming Lips did a record that was filled with human blood. Don't ask me why.
Discussed.
Yeah. How about for us, Chris? I took the inanimate half of Pete's question.
Well, I was even just going to add to that. I mean, I think something that's so crazy is obviously things have been on the upswing even while we were making the movie. But during the pandemic, despite what happened with Apollo Masters, despite pressing plants still having a backlog, record sales continue to increase. In fact, like in 2021 in the US, over almost 42 million albums were sold. That's a jump of 51% in just 1 year. I mean, that's like, it is still spiking. Like, people had been asking Kevin and I, like, do you think it's going to keep growing at the same rate? And we were both like, well, I think it's going to keep growing, but I don't think it's the same rate. And it's like, no, it's like it was a steeper curve last year. And I think a big part of that is, in our film, we show a lot of these young people who are now buying vinyl records. Like I said, my daughter being part of that group. And once you've added that new sector to the people who are actually buying records, to the people who have been buying them in their whole lives, and then people like Kevin and myself are like, yeah, I think I want to get back into records again. Like, all of a sudden, like, you have a much larger group. And when you were stuck at home during the pandemic, listening to records was a great way to entertain yourself and your families. So it's not that surprising that it's boost. Now, do I think it's going to keep going on such a steep curve? No, probably not. But again, like I said, I think there's a wider swath of people of all ages, all races, all genders, who are into this and wanted that tactile feel, again, with their music, and the data doesn't seem to lie. I mean, now, vinyl records, not just in revenue, but in units sold, outsells CDs. And that happened, last year for the first time since 1986. So it's, streaming is still dominant, but then vinyl records is second. It's just one of those things that kind of continues to grow.
So what's next for you?
Oh yeah, I didn't answer that. What's next for us? We are not exactly sure.
Oh, okay.
I think we're kicking around some ideas, and also working on some of our own things as well. Like Kevin said, he's a writer, so I know he's working on his next book. And I've been going back to my narrative roots, but he and I kind of, as we've been working on getting this film out into the world, say like, hey, we got to have that phone call, right? Like, to talk a little bit more about some of those ideas that we've been kicking around. So we don't have anything specific yet that we can talk about, but we're, I think, getting to the point of, you know, trying to figure out on it, like not so much like what is the next thing, but like get moving on that next thing, because as we realize, it takes a while to kind of get going. So Kevin, I'll let you add to that.
I think because it worked this time, like for this movie, I think we'll do a slightly extended version, maybe slightly more intentional version of what we did for Vinyl Nation. I've told Chris I'm going to come to Albuquerque for a weekend, and we're gonna you know spend a lot of time at the diner across the street from the theater where it all began for this adventure, and we'll just kick some ideas around and see what sticks. And I'm guessing one will emerge from that. And I'll say to Chris, do you think this will work? And he'll say, I don't know, maybe like maybe we should just talk about it on Friday morning and see what happens.
Pretty much. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, pretty much. It's gotta be, yeah. And I think that's the thing, is it's something that has to spark with both of us. You know, it's I think we've each had some ideas individually, and the other person has said like, okay, you know, and it's like, okay, well, I'm interested in that, but maybe the other person isn't so interested. So it's like, it may be a good idea, and it might be a good idea for that person to pursue it, but like for us to work on something together, we both have to find something that we're ultimately passionate about. And I wouldn't be surprised if it's something, you know, it'll probably stem from the work that we've done here on Vinyl Nation. You know, I think we'll probably start in the realm of music related, but it doesn't necessarily mean we'll stay in that realm, because I think there are other things thematically that we explored here, I think, that were really interesting. And like Kevin said, when we start to have that brainstorm, it may take us in a couple of different directions. So we don't know, but I think we're both getting to the point that we're eager to work on some things. And when everything was shut down with the pandemic, you know, we traveled a lot, obviously, for this film. And if we were to try to do this film during the pandemic, it would have been really boring over, no offense, but over Zoom.
Yeah.
You know, and I know people who have done stuff like that, and like, hats off to you, especially people who shipped cameras to interview subjects and convinced them to film themselves. Like, that's fantastic. That's not how I want to make a film personally. No. I'd rather wait, but I feel like we're at that point where we might be able to do something like this again, at least by the time Kevin and I figure out what we're doing.
Yeah. We hope. We really do. Like, we understand we're not going to look askance at the very real conditions in the world, but I don't think Chris and I are too excited to make a movie, you know, with him sitting in Albuquerque and me sitting in California. And then I don't.
There is that technology now. You definitely can do it. It's and then there are lots of people that are doing it, at least on the narrative side for sure. But that's not the fun of it. So it's the collaboration and in person. That's definitely the fun of it.
Yeah. Well, gentlemen, thanks so much for joining me tonight. I appreciate it. Want to thank Kevin and Chris for joining us to talk about Vinyl Nation for Spokane International Film Festival 2022. We look forward to your next film.
Thank you. We appreciate
that. Might be 2023, 2024. Who knows?
We'll see. We look forward to it as well.
Yeah, we do. Thank you, Pete. Thank you, Spokane. This is really special.
Thank you so much for having us. This has been great. Thank you.
Yeah.